Shadow the Hedgehog. To some, he's the greatest rival Sonic has ever had. He's the ultimate life form to Sonic's fastest thing alive, the Virgil to his Dante, the Vegeta to his Goku. To others, however, he's the original Sonic recolor. Another example of Sonic Team ripping off Dragon Ball. Cold Steel the Hedgehog, except unironic and actually canon. But if there's one thing about Shadow that cannot be denied, it's that the guy has stood the test of time. Hell, the game he debuted in is often cited as the best game in the franchise, even being the personal favorite of the current series producer, and also the guy who directed that game, so there might be some bias there. Now, what is it about Sonic Adventure 2 that makes it stand out so much for people? Why is it so beloved even to this day? And what did this game do that would enable Shadow to become the second most popular character in the series? Well, to find out, I sat down with two good friends of mine, Owen and my roommate who isn't relevant to something I'm doing in this video, so you don't need to know his name, and spent an entire day playing SA2. All three of us have fond memories of playing Sonic Adventure 2 Battle as kids, but I'm the only person who has played it since. In fact, I last played it a little over 2 years ago, so I was a bit more familiar with how the game tends to work. All this is to say, I'm actually an expert at this game, and anytime the footage shows someone playing poorly, it's not me, I'm innocent, I swear, blame my friends. Another thing I can shift blame onto is the fact that we're playing the Steam port of Sonic Adventure 2. To be clear, I'm fully aware of all the issues with this version of the game. However, we picked it because it was the most accessible to us, as well as the widescreen support. I also didn't install any mods that aim to fix the issues because we're going to be focusing on SA2 as a whole and not specifically this port. Regardless, it is worth noting that we are playing a less than ideal version of the game. After my last visit, I found Sonic Adventure 2 to be a pleasant experience that ultimately solidified my opinion on why I never considered it the best Sonic game. Seeing as this is Sonic Adventure 2, I always think about this game from the perspective of being an adventure game, and honestly, I think there are other Sonic games that are better at achieving that feeling. For instance, Sonic Adventure 1. To me, an adventure game is one where it feels like you're not just going from point A to point B. I'm able to meander and look at other things in between the big moments. I end up in these wildly varied environments that are all distinct from each other, giving this sense that I'm making ground and going places. I never feel like there's been a notable gap of the adventure that the character I'm playing as has gone through that I didn't. How did Sonic and friends get to the Mystic Ruins? They rode a train. How did they get to the egg carrier? They either got on board before it took off, flew to it, or took a boat after it fell. I know this because I did this. This gives the adventure a very clear through line that's easy to follow, allowing me to feel a personal attachment to it, as if I was going on this journey with Sonic and not simply just getting the highlights. Under this personal definition, I think SA1 is a better adventure game than its sequel. But you know what Sonic Adventure 2 does have and does better? Spectacle. An emotionally charged narrative. Unique, varied stages. Refinement, asterisk. And most importantly, a certain black hedgehog. Sonic Adventure 1 didn't even have a certain black hedgehog. That's how you know the sequel does that one better. The biggest step up from Sonic Adventure 1 are the stages themselves. SA1 tended to create stages with a specific character's gameplay style in mind, and then retrofitted the level so that other characters could play in it. For instance, the final part of the Skydeck stage as Sonic has you go into this giant, open cargo bay that feels entirely unlike the more linear design of the rest of the stage. This is because it's actually a non-linear sandbox that was intended for Knuckles to explore. While that method does go a long way in making the game feel like one giant world shared amongst the entire cast, it does hurt it in terms of being a game. It could just feel awkward when you switch from one part of the level designed for one character to a part that feels like it was made with a completely different playstyle in mind. Sure, it might still work, but it can mark a decline in the quality of the level. Sonic Adventure 2 greatly benefits from unique levels designed for their respective character with zero crossover, perfectly crafted for that character and their abilities. Every stage is filled with hidden secrets that can only be found by taking an alternate pathway that's harder to reach, or by returning to it after finding an upgrade in a later level. Not only does it encourage repeat playthroughs, but it encourages a mastery of the mechanics, whether they be based on the character or specific to that stage. Previous Sonic games had this kind of level design, but this is the first 3D Sonic game that I feel got this across perfectly. But what's truly impressive is the context. Almost every stage's aesthetics are in service of the spectacle and story. Now, spectacle, you should be able to understand what I'm talking about just from watching the footage on screen. Fighter jets fly past as their missiles head towards where they think you're gonna be. Legions of gun robots attempt to stop you as you blast your way through every layer of security they have to offer. Flying between Halloween-themed mountains surrounded by strange pillars topped with pumpkin-shaped caps. Every level has a grand sense of scale, making it feel like the world revolves around you. As for story, most levels feel properly set up and make sense for why you'd be running around it. Sonic isn't running through City Escape because he thought it'd be fun, it's just where he ended up while trying to run away from the military. This then naturally leads to Tails breaking into a gun facility to break him out, followed by Sonic fleeing through the forest on the outskirts of the island they're on. These levels lead into each other and together tell a story. I do think there's a bit of a disconnect between levels once they head towards Eggman's pyramid base, but once there, the levels all start to connect back together. Tails gets the team past the initial defenses, Sonic gets them through most of the pyramid, and Knuckles finds the keys to open the door to the rocket they fly to the Ark with. These levels contextualize the one immediately following them, telling the story of how this group is able to make their way through the base. This focus on context is also a major driving force for the Dark story as well, arguably even more so. The only exceptions to this are the early Knuckles stages and the first Rouge stage, which feel completely independent and unrelated to anything else that happens in the game. Wild Canyon, Pumpkin Hill, Aquatic Mine, and Dry Lagoon only really make sense because of the general Knuckles and Rouge are trying to find the emerald pieces and they just so happen to end up here thing. These 4 levels don't build on anything that came before them, nor do they necessarily inform a level down the line. The closest you get is Skyrail, a Shadow stage that has him going through the same general region as Pumpkin Hill. However, beyond reusing assets and being placed near each other on the stage select map, these 2 stages don't have anything to do with each other, nor do they necessarily benefit from these shared elements. You can also interpret the aquatic mines leading towards Knuckles climbing up out of the sewers to finally become relevant to the plot, but to me that feels a lot less like proper plotting and more like someone on the team was struggling to come up with a way to get his plotline to merge with the main story. While all of this might seem almost basic now, this is the first time in a Sonic game I feel the majority of the levels play an important role in building out the story being told, even if the level aesthetics might still be fantastical and over the top in a traditional Sonic fashion. To be clear, I still think this is different from what Sonic Adventure 1 did in terms of creating a connected experience. In that game, it's as though the world and story were crafted to fit traditional Sonic levels. It was focused more on having you experience a Sonic adventure. On the other hand, Sonic Adventure 2 crafts its levels around the story. It's focused on having you experience a narrative while still making sure the game is recognizably Sonic, even if there are moments that don't really blend well. And trust me, there are a number of them. For a long time, every mainline Sonic game made sure to include multiple story campaigns and capped each one off with a last story. SA1 had 7 campaigns, Heroes had 5, 06 had 4, and Shadow, well, I'll get into that in the next video. Sonic Adventure 2 is where this first truly became a trend, starting you off with the ability to play either the hero story or the dark story before unlocking the last story. Regardless of which story you pick, I feel like both of them start off on a great note. The hero story instantly throws you into the thick of it. Sonic, as clueless as you, captured by the military for an unknown reason. He breaks out, rips off a part of the helicopter that surely won't result in it spinning out of control, and diving headfirst towards the second most famous level in the franchise. Similarly, the dark story begins with Eggman blasting his way into a top-secret military base for a reason unknown to the player. Both of these opening scenes instantly grab your attention, slapping you across the face with not just action and adrenaline, but mystery and intrigue as well. These are easily some of the strongest openings to any Sonic game, though ultimately I do prefer the hero story, if only because it starts with one of the best levels in the game, while the other one starts with a shittier version of Gamma. From here, the story is like a roller coaster of quality. Some parts are great, such as pretty much everything having to do with the Ark and Shadow. Other times, it feels awkward and horribly disjointed. Contrivance and coincidence too often drive the plot in the direction it needs to go. For instance, the MacGuffin known as the fake emerald is just way too convenient considering how central it becomes to the entire final act of the hero story. What they do with it is cool, but I wish it had been set up better and wasn't just sprung on you in a half-second explanation. What doesn't help the plot is the terrible localization. Dialogue is frankly just horrible, with everyone coming off incredibly stilted. More than any other game in the franchise does it feel like the localizers rushed the product and translated the script directly. Eggman in particular has a few moments where there are clearly zero attempts to properly adapt the character to English. Frankly, I think a large reason why the story even works as well as it does is because of the actors behind these characters. Sure, the performances aren't the best, but the voice cast does a ton of heavy lifting in making everyone feel unique and personable despite being set up for failure. However, I don't want you to think I think the story is bad. Far from it. I actually still really enjoy it and have tons of great memories. For as uncanny as the animation is, the scene where Eggman blows up the moon is genuinely cool. Every encounter between Sonic and Shadow is awesome and is integral to the story. The game also really excels in melodrama, making every scene feel important regardless of whether it actually is. Sure, it's style over substance most of the time, but that style is so strong I can't help but get swept away by it. Amy is only here to convince Shadow to help at the very end. Until the story gets her to that point, she just kind of exists. She's really not handled well. Since I don't want to end the story segment on a sour note, I want to talk about probably my favorite scene in the game. The final rival battle between Sonic and Shadow is genuinely perfect in terms of direction. The two meet at the opposite end of one long platform leading to the core of the Ark's cannon. For the first time, they take a moment to try and talk to each other, to understand just how exactly the other ticks. But they also understand the urgency of the situation, leading them to slowly start walking as they talk. The more they understand each other, the faster they go, changing their stride from a walk to a sprint to a run. Their acceleration coincides with the building music, as if every step they take powers the instruments, culminating in the fast-paced music that accompanies this final rival battle. Of course, this scene would be a lot better if the sound mixing wasn't all messed up and the rivals weren't talking over each other, but frankly, that's a problem the entire game suffers from. So much for not ending on a sour note. Now, we can't forget what is arguably the most important part of any Sonic game. The game part. To compare it to its precursor again, Sonic Adventure 2 feels like a much more focused version of Sonic Adventure. This time, rather than 6 different gameplay styles, they cut it down to just 3, each providing a unique experience when compared to the others. Sonic and Shadow stages have you rushing to the end of each level. Knuckles and Rouge have you searching all over each map trying to find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald. While Sonic and Knuckles carry over their playstyles from SA1, Tails, and by extension Eggman, now play like Gamma, having you blast your way through each stage in a souped-up mech. The Sonic and Shadow stages are the absolute best in the game, providing the adrenaline-pumping action platforming you come to this franchise for. Honestly, one element I miss even to this day are the various upgrades you used to be able to unlock. I mean, they're still around, but the last time I felt like they were well implemented was Sonic Colors in the form of unlockable wisps. And even then, some people are probably gonna disagree. Anyway, Sonic's upgrades are some of my favorites in the series. Making the Lightspeed Dash instant as opposed to charging it with a Spin Dash was such a game changer for pacing. The Flame Ring feels so natural to do while speedrunning, and the Bounce Bracelet is just fun to use. I really wish the move would return one day. While it does suck that Shadow only has 4 stages, they're still really fun to play. I just wish the rail grinding was better. Even as a kid, I knew it never felt right. While I have nothing but praise for the Sonic and Shadow stages, the Knuckles and Rouge stages feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The designs of these levels are massive steps up from what they were in the first game, but some levels just end up a lot bigger than they need to be. I love the aesthetics of the space levels, but my god, they are way too tall. It's just not that fun going from the bottom of the level to the top only to not find the emerald piece and having to go back down again, only to go back up and just in a cycle. This isn't helped by the radar only going off for 1 emerald piece at a time. You can find them out of order, but it's just a frustrating regression from how it worked in Adventure 1. Continuing with the negativity, I just don't think there's anything positive I can say about Tails and Eggman. Even as a kid, I knew these sections sucked. They're just a worse version of Gamma, and it's almost entirely because of the controls. What made Gamma feel so perfect to me was how it always feels like I'm doing a drive-by shooting. I know where I'm going, I know where my target is, and I can do it as quickly as possible while heading towards the end of the stage. I played each of his levels as if I would get caught if I stopped moving, yet at the same time, I made sure to take out any and every enemy I came across. That game's aiming system, momentum, and sense of speed feel perfectly designed to work in conjunction with each other. In Adventure 2, however, it feels like these aspects are at odds with each other. The aiming system requires you to look around and move in directions that aren't just straightforward. Yet the second you change direction by a single degree, it's like you've lost any and all momentum you had gained. It creates this weird sense of stop and go that doesn't make any of the levels fun for me, regardless of how well designed the level might be. The only way to maintain your momentum while turning is to move like a tank, avoiding sharp turns by making wide, circular movements. But these just aren't tank controls. It doesn't feel like I should have to do that to make it work. Actually, you know what? There is one positive thing I can say about this gameplay style. Eggman's final level, the Cosmic Wall, is fucking awesome. By combining the booster with anti-gravity mechanics, you can effectively float and fly through the entire level. And my god, this fixes the core issues I have with the controls. Your momentum is maintained, there's zero stop and go, and the game returns to that feeling of drive-by shooting that I loved Gamma for. A fantastic level in an otherwise unenjoyable style. Ultimately, I think the main barrier to entry is the jank. Sonic has always been about replaying each level over and over again, learning more and more of the layout to optimize a run and get better times. While your goal is to go fast, going consistently fast is not guaranteed. You have to earn it first. Unfortunately, this objective ends up amplifying the severity of the jankiness that is not hard to find. There were plenty of times where I found myself getting flung off a platform due to wonky physics, or was hit by an enemy or an attack that was in a spot it shouldn't have been. Mix this with a somewhat higher difficulty level than the first Sonic adventure, and I completely understand why someone might find the lack of polish unacceptable for what this game is trying to do. It just doesn't feel fair when the game punishes you because the bones holding everything together were cracking in the first place. However, I did find that with enough patience, you can learn to adapt to it. Should you adapt to poor programming? Probably not. But what I know for sure is that this game gets a lot more fun when you know what to expect. Not to mention, some of this is just mesmerizing. Now, for as much praising and criticizing as I've done so far, I haven't really touched on one important question I asked at the beginning. What did this game do that would enable Shadow to become the second most popular character in the series? Well, the easy answer would be the fact that he's very stereotypically cool and dark. If Sonic is Tony Hawk skateboarding cool, Shadow is Batman cool. He broods, he's practically all black, he has a tragic backstory, etc, edginess. However, for as much as people will love shallow media because it checks the right boxes, I do think there is more reason for why people love him so much. Shadow marked a turn in the Sonic series in terms of storytelling. Up to this point, every game was very lighthearted and fun. The only real narrative depth you would get would be in the rare plot twists like Knuckles being manipulated by Eggman, the tragedy that befell Chaos and Tikal, or the entirety of Gamma as a character. However, these elements never felt as big of a driving force for their game. Gamma is only one character out of 6. Chaos and Tikal do inform the current events, but the vast majority of the time, these flashbacks just kinda happen to each character, and it isn't what pushes them forward. Meanwhile, Shadow is at the core of everything that happens. This story would not exist without his involvement, whether it be his backstory or his actions taken in the plot. He's the one who gives Eggman access to the Ark and its Eclipse cannon. He's the one who gets Sonic arrested. He's the one who leads to all of these mind-blowing revelations that have been kept secret by the government. And yet, he's more than just an arbiter of the plot. Despite his constant bragging of being the ultimate life form, he knows he's still a deeply flawed person. His inability to save Maria from her sickness as well as from Gun's gun haunts him, leading to him becoming radicalized by his creator, Gerald Robotnik, a man who, for all intents and purposes, was an out-and-out sociopath. Shadow has an understandable grudge against humanity, yet a lot of this is him projecting his own feelings of failure, amplified through the lens of revenge. For its time, I think Shadow was undeniably the deepest yet easiest to understand character in the Sonic series. I understood all of this as a kid, and I don't think it's a stretch to say tons of other kids around the world understood it too. With this in mind, it's no wonder Shadow became so popular. He's the culmination of the changing direction for Sonic. One not just focused on gameplay, but one aiming to evoke more than just the feeling of excitement and fun. It's certainly easy to look at Shadow as a character and find tons of things to criticize, but I think he's perfectly emblematic of the game he originated from. A flawed experience, but one full of heart. You know, this whole experience revisiting Sonic Adventure 2 again ended up having way more consequences than I think it should have. But not for me, oh no. I already had my revisit and solidifying of my feelings toward this game a few years ago. No, you see, this experience was most impactful for someone else. My friend Owen. As I said before, he played Sonic Adventure 2 when he was a kid, and he too had fond memories of it. However, unlike me, he had never returned to it until I asked him if he wanted to hang out and spend the day playing. Little did we know the effect it was going to have on this man. When he first started playing, he was having some fun. He thought the controls felt dated and the camera was horribly janky, but he was having fun. He told himself that these were simply common issues of the time. But the deeper in we went, the madder he got. Death after death after death. Sometimes Sonic would move faster than the camera and he'd die, eventually causing him to run out of lives and having to start all over. The timer in the security hall would never give him enough time to find all the emerald pieces, causing them to get shuffled around and starting him over from scratch. Aquatic Mine suffered from an audio glitch. The water drop sound kept playing over and over and over again at an incredibly loud volume with no way to stop it. Knuckles and Rouge's final stages were so big, and the emerald pieces were difficult to find, his mind would slowly go blank. You could say he was bad at the game, but he would say the game was bad at him. That night, he went home upset. A positive childhood memory had been ruined, but its hooks had been placed in his mind. He thought that maybe it was just the PC version that sucked. Maybe the GameCube is actually really good. So he booted up an emulator. But to his dismay, he found it to be equally as terrible. He played the game over and over and over, every time becoming more and more frustrated. He would eventually start to do research on the game's development, trying to understand what on earth happened here. His Snapchat was Rouge the Bat and Fury. He came to a friend's birthday party, got drunk, and proceeded to rant at my fellow content creator Nom over whether Final Rush was the best or the worst Sonic stage, using me as a conduit for his anger. This man's life became Sonic Adventure 2. He started a band and performed City Escape in his high school talent show. He told the girl he liked in elementary school that he wrote Live and Learn. It absorbed him until there was nothing but fat titties and ultimate life forms. Before finally, he got over it. Chao Garden's rad as fuck though. Sega, bring it back, please, I'm begging you.